Have you ever been in a conversation where someone's words felt like poison? Where every sentence was designed to make you feel small, angry, or defensive? Maybe it was a coworker who constantly undermined you, a family member who criticized everything you did, or a friend who disguised insults as jokes. You wanted to respond. You wanted to put them in their place. But deep down, you knew that arguing back would only make things worse. What if I told you there's a way to respond that doesn't involve anger, doesn't require you to raise your voice, and yet completely disarms toxic people? A way that makes them go silent because they realize their tactics don't work on you? Today, we're diving into ancient, Stoic wisdom to uncover 7 intelligent responses that will transform how you handle toxic people. These aren't just comebacks. They're principles that will give you unshakable inner peace. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most powerful emperors, sighed, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Stay with me because response number 5 is the one that changed my life completely. But before we begin, if you're serious about mastering Stoicism and building mental resilience, subscribe and hit that notification bell. You're joining a community of over X, people who refuse to let toxic people control their emotions. Let's begin. Introduction to Stoicism and Toxic People. Before we dive into the 7 responses, let's establish something crucial. What makes someone toxic? And why does Stoicism have the perfect answer? Toxic people share common traits. They manipulate, they blame, they criticize without constructive intent, and most importantly, they feed on your emotional reactions. When you get angry, defensive, or hurt, they win. Your reaction validates their behavior and encourages them to continue. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of philosophy's greatest teachers, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Think about that. The toxic person's words are just sounds in the air. It's your interpretation and reaction that give those words power. The Stoics taught that we can't control other people's behavior, but we have complete control over our responses. And when you master your responses, something remarkable happens. Toxic people lose their power over you. They go silent because they realize they can't manipulate you anymore. Now, let's explore the 7 responses that embody this philosophy. Response 1. The power of silence. The first response is the most powerful, yet the hardest to master: strategic silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You always own the option of having no opinion." There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. Here's what most people don't understand about silence. It's not weakness. It's not letting them win. Strategic silence is a deliberate choice that demonstrates ultimate self-control. Let me share a story. A Stoic philosopher was once insulted by a drunk man in the marketplace. The crowd waited for the philosopher's response. Instead of arguing back, he simply remained silent and continued walking. When his students asked why he didn't defend himself, he replied, "If a donkey kicks you, do you kick back?" This illustrates a profound truth. Not every attack deserves your energy. When to use strategic silence. When someone is clearly trying to provoke you, silence disarms them completely. They expect anger, defensiveness, or justification. When you give them nothing, they're left confronting their own toxicity. When someone criticizes you in public, silence demonstrates confidence. It shows you're not threatened by their opinion and don't need to justify yourself to them. When someone is drunk, emotional, or irrational, silence preserves your dignity. Seneca wisely noted, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Silence gives both parties time to cool down. How to practice strategic silence effectively. First, pause before responding. Take a deep breath. Count to 5 in your mind. This creates space between stimulus and response, the space where your power lives. Second, maintain calm body language. Don't cross your arms defensively or look away nervously. Stand or sit calmly, maintaining gentle eye contact. Your silence should communicate strength, not fear. Third, if you must speak, do so briefly and without emotion. Something as simple as "I see" or "noted" acknowledges them without engaging in their game. The psychology behind why this works. Toxic people are emotional vampires. They feed on reactions. When you deny them this food, they have nothing to work with. Your silence forces them to sit with their own negativity, which is deeply uncomfortable for them. Often, they'll escalate, initially trying harder to get a reaction. This is when you must hold firm. Eventually, they'll realize you're not an easy target and move on. Remember what Epictetus taught. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. When you respond with silence, you remain the master of yourself. In my own life, I once had a colleague who constantly made passive-aggressive comments about my work in meetings. For months, I defended myself, explained my reasoning, tried to win him over. It was exhausting and never worked. Then I discovered Stoicism. The next time he made a snide remark, I simply looked at him calmly and said nothing. The room fell silent. After an awkward moment, the meeting continued. He never made another comment like that again. That's the power of strategic silence. Response 2. The dichotomy of control. The second response comes from one of Stoicism's core principles, the dichotomy of control. This response involves clearly stating what you can and cannot control. Epictetus opened his handbook with these words: "Some things are in our control and others not." Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, property, reputation, command, and in one word, whatever are not our own actions. When a toxic person attacks you, they're trying to control your emotions, your reputation, or your actions. But here's the liberating truth. They can't control any of these things unless you give them permission. How to apply this response? When someone criticizes you, respond with, "I can't control how you see me, but I can control how I see myself." This immediately reframes the conversation. You're not arguing about whether their criticism is valid. You're simply acknowledging that their opinion is beyond your control. When someone tries to make you responsible for their emotions, "I understand you're upset, but I can't control your feelings. I can only control my own actions, which I believe were appropriate." When someone spreads rumors or tries to damage your reputation, "I can't control what others choose to believe. I can only control my own integrity." Let me share a powerful story. A successful business owner once told me about a former employee who left on bad terms and began spreading false information about the company online. The owner's initial instinct was to fight back, to post responses, to correct every lie, to defend his reputation. Instead, he applied Stoic principles. He posted one simple statement: "I can't control what others say about me. I can only control the quality of my work and how I treat people. My actions will speak for themselves." He then focused all his energy on what he could control, serving his existing customers excellently and running his business with integrity. Within months, the false accusations faded because they weren't supported by reality. New customers kept coming based on actual experiences, not online drama. The deeper wisdom here: when you clearly articulate the dichotomy of control, you do something profound. You refuse to play the game toxic people want you to play. They want you to argue, to justify, to defend. But you're operating from a different framework entirely. Your opinion exists in your mind. My character exists in my actions. These are two separate things, and I'm focused only on what I can control, This response is particularly powerful in workplace settings. A toxic coworker might try to blame you for team failures or take credit for your work. Instead of engaging in office politics, you can say, "I can't control how others perceive contributions. I can only focus on doing my best work consistently." Over time, the truth becomes evident. Your consistent quality speaks louder than any argument ever could. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. As emperor, he faced constant criticism, betrayal, and political attacks, yet he wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed." Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. The harm isn't in what happens to you. The harm is in believing that external events can diminish your inner character. And when you understand this deeply, toxic people lose all leverage over you. Practical exercise. The next time someone attacks you, pause and ask yourself, what part of this situation is actually within my control? Focus your response only on that part. Let everything else go. This single shift from trying to control the uncontrollable to mastering what you can. Control is transformative. Response 3. The Socratic question. The third response is brilliantly simple yet devastatingly effective. Ask clarifying questions. Socrates, though not a Stoic himself, influenced Stoic thinking with his method of inquiry. He discovered that you can dismantle toxic arguments not by fighting them, but by calmly asking the person to explain their reasoning. Here's why this works. Toxic comments are usually vague, emotionally charged, and illogical. When you ask someone to clarify exactly what they mean, one of two things happens. Either they realize their statement was baseless, or they reveal their true toxic intent to everyone listening. Examples of Socratic questions. When someone says, "You always mess everything up," respond with, "That's interesting. Can you give me a specific example of when I messed something up? I'd like to understand what you mean." This does several things. First, it removes the emotional charge. Second, it forces them to be specific. Third, it reveals whether they're making a legitimate point or just attacking you. Most toxic people can't answer this question well, because their statement wasn't based on reality, it was based on emotion. They either fumble for an answer, get more aggressive, revealing their true nature, or back down. When someone says, "Nobody likes working with you," respond with, "That's a serious concern. Who specifically have you spoken to about this? I'd like to address it with them directly." Again, you're not defensive. You're not arguing. You're simply asking for clarity. If they're making it up, this exposes it. If there's truth to it, you genuinely want to know so you can improve. When someone makes a passive-aggressive comment like, "Well, I guess not everyone can be as perfect as you," respond with, "I'm sensing some frustration. What specifically would you like me to do differently?" This strips away the passive aggression and demands direct communication. Most toxic people aren't prepared for this because they prefer operating in the realm of vague insults and hidden meanings. A real-world example. I once witnessed a manager dealing with a toxic team member who constantly complained that decisions were unfair without ever being specific. During one meeting, the manager calmly said, "I want to understand your perspective. Can you walk me through exactly what seems unfair and what you would do differently?" The toxic employee stammered, gave vague responses, and couldn't articulate any alternative. The manager then said, "I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. If you develop specific suggestions, I'm always open to hearing them." The complaint stopped. Why? Because the Socratic method exposed that there was no substance behind the criticism. It was just negativity for the sake of negativity. The Stoic principle behind this. Epictetus taught, first learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. By asking toxic people to explain exactly what they mean, you're holding them to this standard. Most can't meet it because their words aren't based on truth. or logic, they're weapons of manipulation. The beauty of this response is that you're not fighting. You're not defending. You're simply asking questions from a place of genuine curiosity. Even if the person is trying to attack you, your calm inquiry transforms the interaction. When to use this response? This works best in professional settings where there's an audience. Witnesses will see that you're being reasonable while the toxic person is being vague or aggressive. It's also effective in family situations where someone makes sweeping accusations. Asking for specific examples forces accountability. However, use caution in situations where the person is looking for any engagement at all. Sometimes, toxic people will see questions as an opportunity to continue their attack. In those cases, silence, response 1, might be better. The long-term impact. When you consistently respond to toxic behavior with calm, Socratic inquiry, people learn that you can't be manipulated with vague attacks. You're requiring substance, specificity, and logic. Most toxic people won't bother with you because you make their tactics ineffective. As Marcus Aurelius noted, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. B1. By requiring clarity and honesty in communication, you model the behavior you want to see. Response 4. The grateful reframe. The fourth response is perhaps the most psychologically disarming. Express gratitude for the lesson. This might sound counterintuitive. Why would you thank someone who's being toxic? But hear me out, this isn't about being a doormat. This is about a sophisticated understanding of Stoic philosophy that transforms attacks into opportunities for growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter? Then throw it out. There are brambles in the path? Then go around." That's all you need to know. Nothing more. Don't demand to know why such things exist, but he also wrote something more profound. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. Notice what he's doing. He's preparing himself mentally by reframing difficult people as teachers. Every toxic interaction is an opportunity to practice virtue, patience, and wisdom. How to apply the grateful reframe. When someone criticizes you unfairly, respond with, "Thank you for sharing your perspective. It's a good reminder to examine my actions and ensure I'm living up to my own standards." Notice what you've done here. You haven't agreed with their criticism. You haven't argued against it. You've simply acknowledged it and reframed it as an opportunity for self-reflection. This completely disarms the attack because there's nothing to push against. When someone tries to provoke you with an insult, respond with, "I appreciate you sharing that. It's a valuable reminder to focus on being the person I want to be, regardless of others' opinions." Again, you're not defending yourself. You're not insulting them back. You're demonstrating that their opinion has no power over your self-worth, and you're even finding value in the interaction. A powerful personal story. Years ago, I had a mentor who embodied this principle. During a public presentation, an audience member rudely interrupted him and said his ideas were naive and impractical. The room went silent, waiting for his response. He smiled and said, "Thank you for that feedback. You've reminded me that I need to provide more concrete examples to support my points. I appreciate you helping me improve my communication." The critic was completely disarmed. He couldn't continue attacking because there was nothing to attack. My mentor had transformed the hostile comment into a learning opportunity. The rest of the audience saw his grace under pressure, which actually strengthened his credibility. Later, I asked him how he stayed calm. He said, "Every person who challenges me is giving me a gift, the gift of testing my ideas and strengthening my character. Why wouldn't I be grateful?" The deeper philosophy. Epictetus taught that we should view difficulties as training exercises. He said, "Difficulties show us who we are. When a toxic person attacks you, they're actually giving you a chance to demonstrate your character. Are you someone who retaliates with equal toxicity? Or are you someone who maintains composure and responds with wisdom? The choice is yours, and the toxic person is inadvertently helping you practice." This reframe also does something important for your own mental health. Instead of feeling victimized by toxic people, you start seeing them as sparring partners who help you develop resilience. This shift from victim to student is empowering. When this response is most effective, in professional settings where maintaining relationships is important, by thanking someone for their feedback, even if it's poorly delivered, you take the high road while making it difficult for them to continue attacking. In family dynamics where you can't simply cut off contact, responding with gratitude maintains your dignity while not escalating conflict. When dealing with people who might have legitimate concerns buried under toxic delivery, your grateful response might actually open the door to productive conversation once emotions cool down. A crucial distinction: the grateful reframe is not the same as being a doormat. You're not agreeing with false accusations or accepting mistreatment. You're simply refusing to engage in negativity while finding genuine value in the experience of dealing with difficulty. If someone crosses serious boundaries, you can still express gratitude while maintaining those boundaries. Thank you for making your feelings clear. I understand your perspective, but I won't be continuing this conversation if it remains hostile. The transformation this creates, when you consistently practice grateful reframing, something remarkable happens to your psychology. You stop fearing toxic people because you no longer see them as threats, you see them as opportunities to practice Stoic principles. This doesn't mean you enjoy dealing with difficult people. It means you're no longer controlled by the fear of encountering them. You've developed a mental framework that transforms every interaction into a chance for growth. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials. Every toxic person is, in a strange way, polishing your character. Response 5. The boundary without explanation. The fifth response is the one that changed my life. As I mentioned at the beginning, setting boundaries without over-explaining. This is where many people struggle with toxic individuals. We feel obligated to justify our boundaries, to explain why we won't tolerate certain behavior, to convince the other person that our limits are reasonable. Here's the liberating truth: you don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. We sacrifice our peace, our time, and our mental health because we're afraid of how others will react to our boundaries." This is backward. The Stoic approach to boundaries: state your boundary clearly and simply without justification or apology. I'm not available for calls after 8 p.m. I'm not available for calls after 8 p.m. because I need time for my family, and I've been really stressed lately. And I hope you understand, the moment you over-explain, you're inviting negotiation. You're suggesting that your boundary is conditional and can be challenged if the other person doesn't agree with your reasoning. Real examples: when a toxic family member demands your time, I won't be able to make it to that event. Not, I won't be able to make it because I have other plans, and I've been really busy, and I need some time for myself. When a colleague tries to dump their work on you, I don't have capacity to take that on. Not, I don't have capacity because I'm already overwhelmed with my own projects, and I've been working late every night. When someone repeatedly brings up topics that hurt you, I'm not going to discuss that topic. Not, I'm not going to discuss that because it makes me uncomfortable, and I think we should move on. Why this works so effectively: Toxic people are boundary testers. They push and push to see how much they can get away with. When you explain your boundary, they see openings. They'll challenge your reasoning, minimize your concerns, or guilt trip you into changing your position. But when you state a boundary without explanation, there's nothing to push against. It's simply a fact, like the weather. The sun sets at 6 p.m., there's no negotiating with that. Your boundary is the same. A transformative personal example. For years, I had a friend who would call me late at night to complain about his problems. I felt obligated to answer because that's what friends do. I would explain that I was tired, that I had work in the morning, that I needed sleep, but I always answered. One day, after studying Stoicism, I realized I was teaching him that my boundaries were flexible. So I changed my approach. The next time he called late, I didn't answer. The next morning I texted, "I don't take calls after 9 p.m. He replied with guilt-tripping messages about how I didn't care about him, how he needed support, how I was being a bad friend. I responded, "I care about you, and I'm not available after 9 p.m. He tried several more times to get me to explain or justify this boundary. Each time, I repeated the same simple statement. Eventually, he stopped calling late. Our friendship actually improved because it now operated on terms of mutual respect rather than me resenting him for violating my boundaries. The psychological principle: boundaries without explanation communicate confidence and self-respect. They say, "I know what I need and I don't need your approval to honor my needs." This is deeply Stoic. Remember what Epictetus taught: freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Your boundary is within your control. Someone else's reaction to your boundary is not. Don't sacrifice the former trying to manage the latter. Common objections and how to handle them. But won't people think I'm rude? Maybe. That's their opinion, which you can't control. What you can control is treating yourself with the respect you deserve, ... But what if they ask why? Respond with, "It's just my policy," or "It's what works best for me." If they push further, repeat your boundary. Do not engage in justification. But what about emergencies? You can acknowledge exceptions while maintaining the boundary. In emergencies, text me and I'll respond when I can. But for general conversations, I'm not available after 9 p.m. The long-term transformation. When you consistently set boundaries without over-explaining, two things happen. First, toxic people either respect your boundaries or remove themselves from your life. Either outcome is positive. Second, you develop unshakable self-respect. You learn that your needs are valid simply because they're yours. You don't need to convince anyone else of this truth. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. We imagine that setting boundaries will lead to catastrophic outcomes. In reality, it usually leads to healthier relationships and greater peace. This is the response that changed my life because it taught me that I'm not responsible for managing other people's reactions to my reasonable boundaries. I'm only responsible for clearly stating those boundaries and honoring them. When toxic people realize they can't negotiate, guilt, or manipulate you into abandoning your boundaries, they often go silent. Not because you've argued with them, but because you've demonstrated that your boundaries are non-negotiable facts, not opening positions for debate. Response 6. The mirror of behavior. The sixth response requires emotional maturity but is incredibly powerful. Reflect their behavior back to them calmly. This doesn't mean mimicking their toxicity. It means helping them see their own behavior by describing it objectively, without judgment or emotion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like that." But sometimes, the path to that best revenge involves holding up a mirror so the toxic person can see themselves clearly. How to apply this response? When someone is yelling at you, Respond calmly. I notice you're raising your voice. I'd like to continue this conversation when we can both speak respectfully. You're not saying they're a bad person. You're not attacking them. You're simply describing what's happening. This objective description often shocks people into self-awareness. When someone is being passive-aggressive, address it directly. I'm sensing there's something bothering you that you're not saying directly. Would you like to talk about it openly? Again, you're reflecting back what you're observing. Passive-aggressive people rely on plausible deniability they want to attack without being held accountable. By naming the behavior, you remove that shield. When someone is manipulating through guilt, I notice that when I set a boundary, you tell me I don't care about you. That seems like a pattern. Can we talk about that? You're not accusing. You're observing. This is crucial. The moment it becomes an accusation, they can become defensive and the conversation devolves. But when you present it as an observation, you're inviting awareness. A powerful story from the Stoics. Epictetus once had a student who constantly interrupted others and dismissed their ideas. Rather than criticizing him directly, Epictetus said, I notice that when others speak, you often speak over them before they finish their thought. I'm curious, do you do this consciously or are you unaware of it? The student was stunned. He hadn't realized the extent of his behavior. Epictetus's calm observation, free of judgment, created space for genuine reflection and change. The psychology behind mirroring. Most toxic people are not consciously aware of how their behavior affects others. They're operating from unprocessed emotions, past trauma, or learned patterns. When you mirror their behavior back to them descriptively, you're creating an opportunity for self-awareness. This is different from calling them names or telling them they're toxic. Those approaches trigger defensiveness. But saying, I notice you interrupt frequently, or I observe that you often criticize, without offering solutions is harder to deny, because it's simply describing observable behavior. When this response works best, in relationships where there's still value worth preserving. If you're dealing with a family member or long-term colleague, mirroring can sometimes break through patterns and create positive change. When the person seems unaware of their impact, some toxic people genuinely don't realize how they come across. Calm mirroring can be a gift that helps them grow. In situations where you have some authority or credibility, a manager mirroring toxic behavior to an employee or a teacher to a student can be particularly effective because there's an inherent power dynamic that encourages reflection. How to mirror without judgment. Use I notice or I observe statements rather than you always or you are statements. Describe specific behaviors, not character traits. I notice you interrupted me 3 times in this conversation. Versus, you're rude. Ask genuine questions rather than making accusations. Are you aware that you're doing this? Rather than, why do you always do this? Maintain calm body language and tone. The power of mirroring comes from your composure. If you're emotionally charged, it becomes an attack rather than a reflection. A modern example. I know someone who used this technique with a toxic coworker who constantly took credit for team achievements. Instead of accusing or complaining to management, she said in a team meeting, I noticed that when we present our work, individual contributions often aren't mentioned. Moving forward, I'd like to make sure we acknowledge everyone's specific work. Does that seem fair to everyone? She wasn't targeting the individual directly. She was reflecting the behavior back to the entire group in a way that made everyone, including the toxic person, aware of the pattern. The behavior changed because it had been brought into conscious awareness. The limits of mirroring. This technique doesn't work with people who are consciously malicious. If someone knows they're being toxic and enjoys it, mirroring won't create change, it might even encourage them. It also requires emotional regulation on your part. If you're triggered or angry, you won't be able to mirror calmly, and the technique will backfire. Finally, some people will react defensively even to neutral mirroring. If that happens, combine this response with response 5, boundaries, or response 1, silence. The Stoic virtue behind this, mirroring behavior embodies the Stoic virtue of wisdom. You're not reacting emotionally. You're responding strategically by creating conditions for awareness and potential change. It also embodies justice, giving people a fair chance to see and correct their behavior before you take more decisive action, like removing them from your life. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. Mirroring is an act of kindness because it gives people the chance to grow, even when they're behaving toxically. The goal isn't to fix toxic people. That's beyond your control. The goal is to maintain your own integrity while refusing to enable bad behavior. Mirroring achieves this beautifully. Response 7. The calm departure. The seventh and final response is perhaps the most powerful of all. Walking away with dignity. This isn't about running away. It's not about defeat. It's about recognizing when a situation is unworthy of your energy and choosing to invest that energy elsewhere. Marcus Aurelius, despite being one of the most powerful men in the world, frequently wrote about the importance of knowing when to disengage. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Sometimes, the strongest response is simply to leave. Understanding the calm departure. This isn't done in anger. You're not storming off or slamming doors. You're calmly recognizing that continuing the interaction serves no purpose, and you're choosing to redirect your energy. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The calm departure is the ultimate expression of this principle. You're choosing not to react to toxicity with more toxicity. You're choosing peace. How to execute a calm departure. In conversations, you might say, "I don't think this conversation is productive anymore. I'm going to step away now." Then do exactly that. No further explanation, no argument, no drama. In relationships, you might say, "I've realized this dynamic isn't healthy for either of us. I'm choosing to create distance." Again, this isn't an invitation for debate. It's a statement of your decision. In professional settings, "I don't think we're going to reach agreement on this. I'm going to excuse myself from this discussion." Then follow through. The key elements. State your intention clearly and briefly. Don't over-explain. Remember response 5. Don't apologize for your decision. Follow through immediately. Don't linger hoping they'll change. Don't give them multiple chances to draw you back in. Depart. Don't look back seeking validation. They might try to guilt you, insult you, or manipulate you into returning. Trust your decision and move forward. A transformative story. A friend once described to me a family gathering where a relative began a political tirade designed to provoke arguments. For years, these gatherings had devolved into shouting matches that left everyone miserable. This time, my friend stood up calmly and said, "I'm here to enjoy time with family, not to argue politics. I'm going to step outside for a while." He then walked out without anger or drama. Others followed his example. The toxic relative was left alone with his tirade. Within minutes, he came outside and apologized. The gathering resumed peacefully. My friend's calm departure did what years of arguing couldn't do it. Established that toxicity wouldn't be tolerated, and it would be met with disengagement rather than engagement. The philosophy behind departure. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. We often stay in toxic situations because we imagine that leaving will be worse than staying. But the opposite is usually true. Every moment you spend engaging with toxicity is a moment stolen from your peace, your growth, and your purpose. The Stoics understood that our time and energy are precious resources. Investing them in toxic dynamics is poor stewardship of your life. When to use the calm departure? When you've tried other responses and the pattern continues. Departure isn't your first option. It's your final boundary when others aren't respected. When you realize the person has no interest in change or mutual respect. Some people are committed to their toxicity. Accepting this reality frees you to walk away. When remaining in the situation compromises your values or well-being. Your mental health is worth protecting, even if that means disappointing others. The different types of departure. Temporary departure. Leaving a single conversation or situation. This creates cooling off time and establishes immediate boundaries. Limiting interaction without completely cutting ties. You might see a toxic family member only at major holidays rather than weekly. Complete separation. Ending a relationship entirely. This is reserved for situations where the toxicity is severe and unchanging. How to handle the aftermath. Expect guilt tripping. Toxic people often escalate when you withdraw the attention they crave. Stand firm. Expect flying monkeys people, who will try to convince you to return, or tell you you're overreacting. Remember, you don't need to justify your boundaries to anyone. Expect relief. Once you're removed from constant toxicity, you'll likely feel a profound sense of peace. Trust this feeling, it's your mind and body telling you that you made the right decision. A crucial distinction. The calm departure is not about punishing the other person. It's not about making them feel bad or teaching them a lesson. Those motivations are ego-driven and unstoic. The calm departure is about honoring yourself. It's about recognizing that you deserve to exist in environments where respect is mutual. It's about choosing peace over drama. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. Each moment you spend in toxic dynamics is a moment you can never reclaim." The calm departure is how you reclaim your moments. The ripple effects. When you practice calm departure consistently, others notice. They see that you won't tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or chaos. This often improves your other relationships because people understand your standards. It also improves your relationship with yourself. Every time you honor your own boundaries by walking away from toxicity, you strengthen your self-respect. You prove to yourself that you're worth protecting. Finally, it sometimes creates change in the toxic person. When they lose access to you, they're forced to confront their behavior. This doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's because your departure removed the audience for their toxicity. The ultimate Stoic wisdom. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. The toxic person's behavior is beyond your control. Your presence in their life is completely within your control. When you understand this distinction deeply, the calm departure becomes not just an option, but an expression of your freedom. You're not trapped. You're not obligated. You're not responsible for fixing, tolerating, or managing other people's toxicity. You are free to walk away, and that freedom is one of life's greatest gifts. We've covered 7 powerful responses that make toxic people go silent, each rooted in ancient Stoic wisdom. Response 1. Strategic silence. The power of not engaging when provocation serves no purpose. Response 2. The dichotomy of control. Clearly stating what you can and cannot control, and focusing only on the former. Response 3. The Socratic question. Asking for clarification. To expose baseless attacks while maintaining composure. Response 4. The grateful reframe. Finding value in difficult interactions as opportunities to practice virtue. Response 5. Boundaries without explanation. Setting clear limits without justifying or apologizing. Response 6. The mirror of behavior. reflecting toxic patterns back objectively to create awareness. Response 7. The calm departure. Walking away with dignity when a situation is unworthy of your energy. But here's what's most important to understand. These aren't just tactics. They're expressions of a deeper philosophy about how to live. The Stoics believe that the highest good is virtue living according to wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. When you respond to toxic people using these 7 approaches, you're not just protecting yourself. You're practicing virtue. The transformation these create, when you master these responses, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing toxic people. You don't avoid them out of fear, you simply recognize that their opinions and behaviors don't have power over your inner peace. You become what the Stoics called invulnerable, not because nothing can hurt you physically or emotionally, but because you've developed a fortress within yourself that external events cannot breach. Marcus Aurelius described this perfectly. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Your 7-day challenge. I want to challenge you to practice one response each day for the next week. Day 1. Practice strategic silence. When someone tries to provoke you, simply don't engage. Day 2. Apply the dichotomy of control. When stressed about something, clearly identify what you can and cannot control. Day 3. Use Socratic questions. When someone makes a vague criticism, ask them to be specific. Day 4. Practice grateful reframing. Find one difficult interaction and identify what you learned from it. Day 5. Set one boundary without explanation. Notice how it feels to simply state your limit. Day 6. Mirror someone's behavior objectively. Describe what you're observing without judgment. Day 7. Execute a calm departure. Walk away from one situation that doesn't serve you. The deeper journey. These 7 responses are just the beginning. Stoicism offers a complete philosophy for living well, regardless of external circumstances. I encourage you to read the original Stoic texts. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, Epictetus's Discourses and Handbook, and Seneca's letters will change your life if you let them. But more importantly, practice. Stoicism isn't about knowledge, it's about application. As Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Every toxic interaction is an opportunity to embody these principles. Every difficult person is a chance to practice what the Stoics preached. A final thought. The goal isn't to make toxic people go silent because you want to defeat them. The goal is to maintain your own peace regardless of how others behave. When toxic people go silent around you, it's simply a natural consequence of your unshakable composure. They go silent because they realize they can't manipulate you, provoke you, or control you. And in that silence, you've won something far more valuable than any argument. You've won your freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote one final lesson that I want to leave you with. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. No toxic person can control the quality of your thoughts unless you give them that power. These 7 responses are how you reclaim that power. Your next steps. If this video resonated with you, I have 2 requests. First, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We're building a community of people who refuse to be controlled by external circumstances. Your presence matters. Second, share this video with one person who needs to hear this message. Someone in your life is struggling with toxic people right now. This could be exactly what they need. Leave a comment telling me which response resonated most with you, or share your own story of dealing with toxic people using Stoic principles. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Remember, you are not responsible for other people's toxicity. You are only responsible for your own virtue. When you focus on that, when you live according to Stoic principles, you become truly free. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until the next video, practice these principles, protect your peace, and remember the words of Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Now go out there and show the world what Stoic strength looks like.